Thank you for joining us. If you are, we are discussing our favorite soft drinks. I mentioned that my favorite is Coke Zero. Mark, what is your favorite soft drink?
Well, I haven't drinking pop, as we say here in Colorado, in quite a long time. But if I did, I will admit, when I was a young teenager, when I used to skateboard, when I was a punk, I used to love me an ice cold. It had to be out of the can Mountain Dew, and man, I would crush those things.
Little, isn't it Mountain Dew the one that if you I don't know, put a battery in it, it starts to glow or something?
I don't know. There's been all kinds of rumors about it, like makes your penis small, like low sperm count, all this other crazy stuff. Yellow 5, apparently. I don't know, but I don't drink it anymore.
Well,
So,
I should start drinking it because I'm a little too large, the ladies say. So I could use some shrinkage.
all
Envision
right.
that, folks, while we start our intro music.
What's up, everybody? We are the NFL experts. I am Mark D, and join me as always, my main guy. Oh, wrong way. Wayne G. What's up, man?
Not too much, Mark. What is pippity poppadin? I got my suit on again 2 weeks in a row, and I'm feeling pretty good about the episode.
So basically, what Wayne's telling all you guys out there is that he's trying to make me look bad in the clothes department. He's like, I'm gonna wear a suit. Well, I'm in here wearing a scrubby hoodie and a hat, but I don't care. Let's do it.
Absolutely. So, where can people find us?
Like I always say, here's the spiel. If you like anything that you hear tonight and you want to send us a comment or a question, or you maybe want to give us a follow, you can check us out on all our social medias. We are NFL Experts Pod on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok. And if you have a topic for the show, write us an email at editforexpertspod.com. And if you missed the live stream, find us on Spotify. And now, thanks to Wayno, you can be able to find us on iTunes and Amazon Music. So check it out.
Absolutely. We are available on Amazon and iTunes and Spotify. So, a lot of different ways to listen to us. If you are listening to us, thank you so much for the listen. Please make sure to check out the live show. It is available on YouTube and on Facebook. Right now, there's a little bit of an issue with Twitter. I'm not sure what it is. I have a red exclamation point. I have to look into that after the show. But you can at least go on YouTube and you can find previous episodes. So if you missed it and you want to watch it, it's there. We have all the episodes right there on YouTube. You can check them out. I've started to get back into the reels. I only did one last week, but I'm trying to get more and more as we get going.
Yes, and it was one of mine saying Chiefs are not a playoff team, which I still agree with.
Actually, it was Brock Purdy's not a top 10 quarterback.
Oh, okay, that's what it was. With Brock Purdy is in the top 10, and so yes, I agree, and I'm glad that you put my hot take out there, Wade.
Yes, it's a very hot take because it's wrong, like all hot takes. So our first segment might be our only segment for a little while here. We might not have I'd buy that for $1. So I got to hear my guy just for a second. I'd buy that for $1. All right. We may not hear him later in the show, so I had to get him out of the way. We are talking around the NFL, and there's all kinds of stuff to talk about, essentially. So first and foremost, let's talk about the biggest story right now, which is Brandon Ayuk. We know that he demanded a trade. We mentioned it before. And finally, yesterday, allegedly, there were two teams close to a deal as well as a signing, which was the Browns and the Patriots. They were working on a contract as well as a trade package. Those were the two favorites. Then out of nowhere, the Steelers swooped in, and then the Patriots fell out because Brandon Ayuk didn't want to play for them. So it's been a huge soap opera. And as of right now, he's still not signed anywhere. What are your feelings about Brandon Ayuk?
Well, we talked about this off air. He's looking for $30 million a year. No, I'm not giving him that. And then you expect me to give up like draft picks and compensation also for him? Wouldn't be doing that. So I can kind of understand why he hasn't been traded yet, because I'm sure Cleveland and Pittsburgh and the Patriots, I think the Patriots were the one team that was like, hey, we're willing to pay you that and give up the draft capital. And he's like, no, I'm not going there. And then, so now you had Pittsburgh in the race. They kind of were dipping in, and then they dipped out, and then they renegotiated again, and now they're out again, apparently. So I think the one team could be Cleveland, which I told you, Cleveland freaking does these stupid mistakes with these players. They're going to have Jerry Jeudy, Deshaun Watson, now Ayuk. They could have it.
Yeah, it's going to be a mess with this whole situation, and I'm not a fan of it. And let's just take a look at $30 million a year and what that represents, because I have here 4 or 3 wide receivers getting $30 million a year. That's Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown. Tyreek Hill and Amon-Ra St. Brown both had 119 catches last season. So if you divide 30 million by 119, you get $252,000 per catch. Now, a little bit less for A.J. Brown. He had 106 catches. So that works out to $283,000 per catch. So let's say that we give Brandon Ayuk on the high side, $283,000 per catch. He had 75 catches last year. That's $22 million a year. That's T. Higgins money.
That's about what he deserves. I wouldn't give him 30. There's no way.
No, I mean, and I mentioned this to you in a text, and you completely agreed. I said, if I'm going to pay you Tyreek Hill money, I want Tyreek Hill production. So if I give him that kind of money, I want 119 catches for 1,700 yards. No 75 catches for 30 million.
I think the whole time that he's been there, Wayne, he hasn't had that many catches. So why does he think he deserves it? I've always wondered about these contracts. Is it for what he did before or what he's going to do for you in the future?
I think it is what he thinks he can do if he's in a situation where he is the premier target. Now, we mentioned in San Francisco, you have him, you have Debo, you have Kittle. So he's sharing those targets. I mean, he's got the most receptions and the most yards, I think, of the 3 of them. But still, he wants to go somewhere where it's like him, then a huge drop off to the number 2 guy. And he thinks if that happens, he can pull in 119 balls for 1,800 yards. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think he's that guy. I don't care. Even on the Patriots, where he would be the only real target, I don't think he puts up those kind of numbers. I don't think he has that kind of ability.
I'm with you. I don't think I don't think he's that guy either. He's like a good number 2 for any other team out there, just like he is for the Niners. He's like their 2 guy, so he needs to get 2 type of money and not number 1 type of money, not Tyreek Hill money, because he's not there. He's not that guy. So I agree with you, Wade.
And I had that conversation with somebody else. I said, he's a number 2 receiver. Despite what his stats might say, despite what he might be on the top 100, which we'll talk about later, he's the number 2 guy, unless he goes to Philadelphia or Miami, where he's a number 3 guy, because they have 2 receivers on those teams that are better than him.
So we were talking about the teams that he's going to be traded to, right? So Pittsburgh, okay, they have George Pickens. Is he that much better than George Pickens? I think George Pickens is got great athleticism, and he could be the better guy than Ayuk.
He could be. I think it's very even. So again, I think Pickens is the number 2. He's a number 2 who's on a team that uses them like a number 1. But I think, again, you put Pickens with A.J. Brown, he's number 2. You put him with Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's number 2. Pickens is another guy who's a number 2. He's a small fish or a big fish in a small pond. And I think Ayuk is as well. I think if you put them on the same team, well, then you just got 2 big fishes in a small pond. You got 2 number 2s. It doesn't really matter.
So, like I was saying, I think Cleveland is going to be the team. Cleveland is going to be willing to pay him because they make stupid decisions by paying guaranteed money. We all know what that's about, Wayne. And then now they're going to sign this dude. And then I hear that they might be willing to give up Amari Cooper in the deal. And that might be appetizing to San Francisco. They're like, hey, we'll get a veteran guy. We'll give up this guy we don't really think is that great. And you can pay him. We're not going to have to pay him. So maybe that's what they're thinking.
And this is my hot take on that topic. I think Amari Cooper is an upgrade for San Francisco if they get him back.
Oh, shit. You know what? I would have to agree with you. I think he's had more consistent seasons put together than Ayuk has. You're right.
Now, speaking of Amon-Ra St. Brown and receivers, a topic that we wanted to bring up last week, we ran out of time. We're going to hit it at the beginning of the show today. The Netflix show Receiver. I've watched every episode, which I can't tell you how much I hated it. I know that you liked it. You're the one that told me to watch it for this show. And of course, I'm all about research. Before I get into how much I loathed the show, I'm curious, what did you like about the show?
Dude, Wayne, you know me, man. I'm a football nerd. Okay. And so when these shows came out, they came out during the time when there's nothing going on in football. So I'm at that time, I'm like, I'm probably the NFL target because I'm the guy that's like looking for anything football during the time when there is no football. So it feeds to a guy like me. But like how you were saying, like you didn't really enjoy it. Like after thinking back on it, I'm not totally sure I fully enjoyed it. I think I just mainly enjoyed it because it was football and it made me excited about the season coming up.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I guess looking at it, I watched it. Now, those who don't know, the show follows Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, and Amon-Ra St. Brown through the 2023 season. You see a little bit of football. It really focuses on the off the field stuff, family stuff, training, injuries, contracts, things like that. The thing I found most interesting was a little bit of the drama, and that was in Las Vegas. I really felt like you could feel how much Devontae Adams was frustrated watching those episodes. Like I actually felt bad for. I'm not a Devontae Adams fan, and I don't feel bad for him at all in the world. He's got everything handed to him, so good for you, Devontae.
Right.
But I found myself watching these episodes and feeling bad for him being in that situation.
To be honest with you, I kind of did too. I liked it, Wayne, because you see the stuff that you don't see on Sundays. You know, you don't see him like these guys fighting these injuries. You don't see. I got to admit, when I watched this, it really made me love George Kittle. Like George Kittle is so awesome. Like this show shows his personality. I thought it was really cool that every game his family just drives a party bus to the game. So they just have fun. And it's like Sunday's like a holiday, which is always growing up for me. It was like Sunday was the day you hung out with all your friends, watch football. And it's what it reminded me of. And it just certain things like that I just really dug because you don't really get to see the behind the scenes of football.
Well, and I'll say what I think turned me off from the entire thing was, to me, it was the football equivalent of $1 Million Listing. I don't know if you've seen the show $1 Million Listing, but what it's about is it follows 3 20-something-year-old real estate agents who sell multi-million-dollar mansions, and they make multi-million-dollar commissions on these, and they drive Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and they're like 23 years old, 24 years old, and they talk trash to each other and everything. Wide receivers is the biggest group of prima donnas of any position group. And so watching a bunch of really self-important multi-millionaires, it just didn't do it for me. I'd rather watch $1 Million Listing.
Okay, so after watching this, Wayne, these are some of the things that I picked up from the show. Okay, number one, like I said, really made me love George Kittle even more. I think he's an awesome dude. Really shows his personality. 2, it really showed how the offense is driven in San Francisco. It goes Christian McCaffrey's like their number one guy. He drives the offense, and then you have Deebo. Deebo's hurt. Their offense struggled. You kind of see that in the show. Same thing with the Devontae Adams thing. Like you said, you can literally see like his frustration of why he just wants a quarterback that's going to give him the ball consistently. He can't even get that where he is in Las Vegas for the Raiders. And then I noticed, and then I was really interested because it showed the NFC championship game again, and it broke it down, and it really showed me that if Josh Reynolds, their wide receiver, if he didn't drop 2 passes, Detroit's probably winning that game going to the Super Bowl. But he dropped these passes on critical 4th downs, screwed their whole drives, and that's why they lost ultimately. And it just really made me realize that even though I had seen it but all the time had passed, and I was like, oh yeah. And it really like broke it down, and I was like, man, that guy catches those passes, they're in the Super Bowl. And it kind of made me laugh also because we just signed Josh Palmer to the Broncos, and if he drops the ball, I'm like, that can't be good.
Well, here's my question, because it did get a 7.8 rating out of 10 on imdb.com. It did reach number 1 on Netflix for a little bit. And my question is, so do we get a season 2 of receiver, or do they go to another position group? And follow-up question to that, if we do get season 2 of receiver, is it the same receivers or do we get different receivers?
No, it's like we talked off air, Wayne. I you know me, I read all this stuff. They said they tried getting another quarterback series, like season 2. They couldn't get any quarterbacks to agree. So I feel like that might go with any other position group. So maybe they just go from position group to position group. And I think the most interesting one next might be offensive line.
I think offensive line would be even more boring. I mean, just seeing guys block instead of catching the ball and running and scoring touchdowns, they're just going to block.
But like I
people
said, I
like,
want to see the behind the scenes of what they do, man. Like people don't see that.
they block puppets and then they block players. I want to see catching balls. Let's get through some position groups first.
Who do you think, Wayne? Who do you think? What position should they do?
Well, first of all, let's talk if they stick with receivers. I wrote down some names here. I said, Tyreek and Waddle. Maybe if you want to do 2, how you had Kittle and Debo. I said, Devontae Smith and AJ Brown would be another good one if you want to do a duo. Wherever Brandon Ayuk goes, that'd be very interesting to follow him there. I have Calvin Ridley. I think would be interesting on the Titans because he's got the other receivers that he's dealing with there. And Marvin Harrison Jr. I think would be a lot of fun. DJ Moore in Chicago would be really good. And if you're going to throw a tight end in there, I'd love to see Kelsey. Not only are we going to see the Chiefs and Mahomes, we're going to get so much Taylor Swift behind the scenes stuff.
Oh, God, no. Please, Wayne, no. We're going to have to deal with that again for another season. Please don't let me deal with that on another show. No.
Tell me the NFL doesn't jump at that.
But I think you're right about O-line. You're right. That's probably boring. I'm just a football nerd, and I kind of want to see what they do. But yeah, they're either going to have a continuation of receiver, or they got to have another continuation of quarterback.
Well, I said they could do running back. I'd be interested to see a running backs one. And the names I listed here are Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, I think are interesting. And then if you want to keep some of these teams, because I think part of the problem too is getting a team that's going to allow that kind of like backroom access, and we know that the Lions will and the 49ers will. So we get Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs. You can follow those guys. I think there'd be a lot of teams that'd be willing to do it. And so running back, I would be interested in. Receiver, cornerback, maybe I could do corners, but and then of course quarterback, but that's about it. I don't want to watch offensive and defensive linemen, even though defensive linemen, at least you got pass rushers who are getting sacks and stuff, but O-line would be I would rather watch punters and kickers than I would rather watch O-linemen.
I was waiting for it. I was like, what is he going to say? All right. No, you're right. I agree with you. I'm a football nerd. This is what I am, Wayne.
Now, from a boring show to a really interesting show, and nobody does it better than HBO Sports. HBO came out with this year, first season of Hard Knocks off season. So we've seen Hard Knocks during the preseason. I remember watching every episode, waiting week to week. Season 1, Baltimore Ravens, and just being like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. And then it got a little stale, season 20, season 18, whatever it is. And then they started doing Hard Knocks regular season. They followed the Dolphins last year. And this year they did the New York Giants off season. And
which is the first of this kind.
First ever, and God, do I want more of this. I want more signings, draft stuff, scouts. I want it all, and I want multiple teams during the offseason because I think you could turn this into a receiver type of series. If you pick 2 or 3 teams to follow their GMs during this process, dude, we could get a 12 episode, and then after the finale, we're into preseason football.
You know what? So I'm with you, Wayne. I think the offseason one is by far the best of the group because you have in season now, and then you always had training camp, and now you have offseason. So it's really cool because it showed how they sign players and how they break down like their contracts and how much they want to get paid, which I thought was really interesting. And then how they scouted the players for the draft. That was super interesting. And then like the decisions that were made nights before the draft. And like, I thought it was really cool how Joe Shane broke down to the owners. Okay, if this guy falls here and this team picks him, we're going to go with this guy. And like how he broke down the whole thing. I thought that was super interesting because that's really how you got to think about it as a GM. You got to think about who's going to make what move. And they got lucky because their whole main thing was they wanted neighbors, and they needed Joe Alt to be picked by the Chargers, which I predicted. Wayne, remember, toot. And they did, and so that's how they were lucky enough to get neighbors.
Yeah, and I thought that it was great. I loved almost everything I saw. I do think there was a little bit of hamming it up for the cameras at times. In particular from Brian Daboll, he was unbearable.
Yes, he was. He was.
He was
Mhm.
horrible. I know you hated the lady with the Emmy behind her, right? You hated that lady.
God.
But like I hated Daboll. Every time Daboll was on screen, it seemed like he was trying to act like some sort of tough guy or something.
He was,
and I'm like,
right.
I said, what the hell's wrong with this guy?
He was trying to sound like some tough badass coach. Like, remember how he was like, oh, I need some dogs. It's like, oh, dude, he doesn't talk like that. I'm sorry. I don't buy that at all. So I'm with you on that.
No, he's a Belichick guy. And can you imagine Belichick? Like he would bring in scouts. That'd be so much more interesting to just have him say, like, all right, and break down the film here. Like just totally quiet. And I can imagine like the one scene where they brought in, I think, Jaden Daniels, and Dayball goes, all right, let's just cut to the crap, okay?
Right.
You want to be here? I'm like, shut up.
Right. That was like the most dramatic part. Like he was actually thinking like he was gonna say no or something crazy. Like, come on, man. He's gonna be like, yeah, of course I want to be here. Like, come on.
Yeah. Whoever picks me, that's where I want to be.
Right.
Except
so another thing I was right about, Wayne, was they did try to get him, but the cost was too high, and that's why they ultimately didn't do it.
Now I do have to ask, because we just talked about some ideas for receiver season 2, running back season 1. Let's talk about Hard Knocks off season, season 2. Obviously, I want multiple teams. Are there any teams that you think would be interesting to follow during the off-season process?
Like right now?
Well, like let's say at the end of the season, just kind of projecting out, like if you had to pick a couple of teams, 3 teams, whatever, like who do you think would make an interesting off-season, Hard Knocks?
That's a good question, Wayne. That is a good question. I guess for me, I think it would be Buffalo, because I'm always curious about decisions they make. And I'm like, why did they make these decisions? So maybe I can see behind the scenes and see why they make these decisions and find out more into it. So yeah, I think that would be interesting.
Now I listed a team on here, the Carolina Panthers, only because you've got the young quarterback. You would be going into your 3rd season with him, trying to draft around him, getting him receivers or offensive line or whatever you're trying to get him. We've already seen Dan Morgan a little bit on this episode, so they might be open to it. And what I think would really open them up to it is the opportunity to make David Tepper not look like an asshole. Like maybe make him look a little bit better.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
I'd also said the Atlanta Falcons would be interesting because you could talk about how they took a quarterback without talking to Kirk Cousins last year. So what are they going to do in the draft this year? Are they going to talk to Kirk Cousins about what they're doing? Have that kind of aspect to it. But then I also said I'd like to see a team like that goes deep into the playoffs, because yes, it's interesting to see them scout guys and try to pick who they want 3rd, 4th, or 5th. I think it's even more interesting to see them scout for 27, 28. You know what I mean? And so for me, I think a team I have on here is, the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, again, Jordan Love coming off of year 2. What do? We know the Green Bay Packers draft strategy is they do not take anything but offensive line and corner in the 1st round. They don't take receivers. They don't take, so that's interesting to hear that draft strategy in the draft room. And especially if they're scouts like, dude, we need a wide receiver, like see that play out would be great. And then of course, Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, again, anything where they're like Mahomes, Andy Reid, just scarfing down burgers while he's scouting guys would be great.
But also, as we talk about this, Wayne, these also got to be GMs that are going to keep their job, because some of these GMs might not have a job at the end of the season. So it's got to be a guy that's secure in his job. And then as I think about this, what about Howie Roseman from the Eagles? That guy's made some crazy good moves as a GM. That'd be super interesting to see.
Well, I would almost rather see a guy who's going to lose his job. How great would it be? Episode 1, they're like kind of scouting it out. They're putting up the big board, and the owner comes and is like, "Hey, yeah, Jeff, can I talk to you for a second?" And then they go into the cameras are there.
Like the training camp, where he's like, "Bring your playbook. Bring your playbook."
He's like, "Yeah, we're just gonna have to go ahead and let you go." It's all Bill Lumberg. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be some good dramatic effect, but they're not even doing that to the players anymore, so they're not going to do it to GMs, man. But that would be very funny.
The other bit of news kind of out there, we had the big release of the NFL 100. It was released 10 people at a time each week, I think, or something like that with NFL.com. And so here's the thing. This is how it works, is the NFL players vote on who the best players in the NFL are. And each player gets a ballot with 20 blank slots. They can put any names in there that they want. But they have to put them in order of how they think they rank. And then those ballots get submitted to NFL Films or whatnot, and then they get tallied up. And how they get tallied is if you were ranked 20th on somebody's ballot, you get 1 point. If you're ranked first, you get 20 points. And so the way it could work out, and here's an example: Josh Allen, out of 5 votes, let's say he gets a first place, 5th, 6th, and 9th, which is pretty realistic. That's 83 points. So then you get Jalen Hurts, who gets a second, 3rd, and 5th, right? That's 91 points. So even though Josh Allen got 2 first-place votes, he would be behind Jalen Hurts because he had more total points. So that's kind of how it works. I think we've talked about it a little bit off the air, how the scoring system works. How do you feel about the scoring system before we get into the results?
I think the scoring system is actually really interesting, Wayne. I'm glad that you broke that down and figured that out because I never knew how they did it. I figured it was something like that. But that's interesting. But like I was saying off air, this is, to me, this is my conspiracy hat. I'm going to put my conspiracy hat on right now. And I think that the NFL puts this out there for clicks. Like they want us to keep engaged in the season. Like, so if we're like ranking players, and of course there's going to be disagreements. Like, I think this guy should be here, this guy should be there, blah, blah, blah. And I think they do that to get engagement, to get us talking about it, because we're talking about it right now.
They do. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because back in 2013, I think this came out in 2011. In 2013, Connor Barwin at the time was a linebacker for the Eagles, and he tweeted out, that no actual players vote, right? And then the Colts punter, a guy named Pat McAfee, he commented on that saying, love this tweet, right? So there was this kind of thought that nobody's voting on it. And then the NFL released the actual numbers from that year. They didn't release them for this year or last year, but from that year, out of 1,600 ballots that they handed out, 451 players turned them in, and they scored the 451 ballots. So not everyone is betting. And then it's like, or not betting, but filling out the ballots. But then it's like, who is filling it out? Because if you get a bunch of wide receivers, they're probably going to be wide receiver and corner heavy. If you get certain teams, like maybe like 8-10 guys on one team fill it out, well, they're picking their teammates, so there's a little bit of, bias in it.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because it also, so it also makes me think when you say that, it's like, don't you notice when you read these lists that it's like kind of all the same positions and it's usually just ranked of those positions just in the top 100. So like there's certain positions that they care about more. Like when I was looking at this list, Wayne, I noticed that there was no centers this year picked. So you're telling me there's not one good center to put on the list?
Well, like I said, who's going to vote for a center other than either his teammate or somebody who played against him, I guess like a defensive tackle or something like that. And so that makes me think, who is voting? Because if wide receivers are primarily voting or corners, they're not putting any interior guys on there, so it's, I think there's that. And then there's also just the popularity, right? Like I might be a rookie and I'm going to fill it out because I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I get to participate. So I'm filling out my ballot. I've never played against Patrick Mahomes. So how can I rank him number 1 if I've never actually played against him? How is that fair? Other than the fact like, well, yeah, but I've seen him on TV. So he's number 1. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
It takes away the whole idea of this is a player's vote because we're thinking, oh, because they play against these guys. Not always.
You're right. And that's a good point because you're right. A lot of teams are in different conferences, so they only play each other like every 4 years. So yeah, you were correct about that.
Now, I do want to bring up the results here. So let's talk a little bit here. 2024, the number 1 player in all of the NFL, according to NFL players, is Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins. He was number 7 last year. He jumped 6 spots to number 1. I do think he is arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. I've said I think CeeDee Lamb is. CeeDee Lamb was the 2nd ranked receiver, so it's close. But what are your thoughts on a receiver, not a quarterback, being the top guy in the NFL?
Yeah, so I don't mind any other position sharing that honor because it should go that way. It should change from year to year because not always the quarterback's going to be the number 1 guy. And like we were talking off air, Wayne, you hadn't really experienced this list before, and I've been watching them for years. And there's been other times where a quarterback wasn't number 1. Like I told you off air that I'm pretty sure that Aaron Donald had won it 2 years in a row and he got number 1. So I'm not sure how they decide these things. Like I said, I think it's a conspiracy. Like, I don't know who's voting still. Maybe they did in the beginning, but they don't anymore. I think it's all just for engagement and drama for the NFL now. But, just my thought.
Well, and I was thinking this is, again, if you put these guys into a room, and this is the point system, so it's possible that Tyreek Hill did not get a single first place vote, but he still was the number one player because he had the most points. And my question would be, how many of these guys, 400, 500, maybe all 1,600 filled it out this year? I doubt it. But let's say, how many of these guys, if you put them into a room and you said, you're the GM now, we're starting all over with a fantasy draft, you have the first pick, so you get to build your team around anybody in the NFL. How many of them are taking Tyreek Hill with the first pick over Patrick Mahomes?
Right. No one. I know I wouldn't.
Yeah. It's quarterback. You got to go with a quarterback.
Yes.
And,
so go ahead, Wade.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Well, I have some qualms about the list. I don't know if that's what you're going to just bring up.
Nope, I was not.
Okay, so these are my little things that I picked up that I did not like about the list as I was going over it. Okay, so Rodgers was number 92. He didn't even play last year. He played 4 fucking snaps. And you're going to put him on the list? He shouldn't have been on the list. And then also what makes me mad is there's no Baker Mayfield on the list. Baker should have been in that spot where Rodgers was, not Rodgers. Baker actually brought a team that he had never played for to the playoffs, won a playoff game, and you're not going to put him on the list? And then my other beef was they have Sauce Gardner. This is another thing that pisses me off. Every cornerback ranking that you see, they have Sauce Gardner over Pat Surtain. I'm sorry. I think Pat Surtain is the best cornerback in the league, not Sauce Gardner. So Surtain shouldn't have been 52, and Sauce Gardner should have been 38. It should have been switched. And then they told these, and then there's players that were left off the list, like Jalen Johnson from the Bears. I think he's a really good corner. He wasn't on the list. DJ Moore, I think he's a really good wide receiver. He wasn't on the list. TJ Hawkinson. Like I was mentioning, centers, Frank Ragnow, Creed Humphrey from the Chiefs, and then my guy, Quinn Miners. Like, there was no guard. There were some guards on there, but he was one of the best guards, and he's not on the list either. So, like we were talking earlier, I think it's a popularity contest, and maybe some of these guys aren't just as popular with other players.
Well, I'm glad you did. So you kind of jumped ahead to what we were going to talk about here. But since I have 2 pages of notes, we're going to revisit because
go ahead. My bad.
I was going to start with the top 5 receivers. Let's just go position by position. And receiver wise, the top 5, they have Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't think you can really argue that, as that's a pretty solid top 5, right? For me, I'm looking at the guys who came after that.
Agreed.
And I'm talking about like Puka Nacua was rated 33rd ahead of Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, and Stephon Diggs. Do you think Puka Nacua is better than those 3 guys?
I don't think he is, but I think based on last year and him almost breaking that rookie record, I think that's why he's that high.
But then we get into the conversation, and you know how much I hate hypocrisy, right? Like, if somebody says something that contradicts what they just said, I love to throw it in their face. So you brought up Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers played 4 snaps. He's still on the list, right? So obviously we don't care about how they played last year. We're just talking about these are the best players in the NFL when they're healthy, I guess. And when they're healthy, there's no way Puka Nacua is better than Jamar Chase.
Right. No, I would agree with you. Yes. So this all comes down to like we were saying, we don't know who makes this list.
Yeah, like what position groups. The 2 guys I had for wide receiver that should have been on there, Michael Pittman had 109 catches last year, and Michael Pittman's really good. He would have had 100 the year before if he hadn't gotten hurt. And DJ Moore, super underrated. I think DJ Moore is a legit top dog receiver. So those 2 guys I think got a little bit snubbed, but they already had 20 receivers on this list. What are you going to have? A list of 50 receivers and then 50 everybody else?
Right. Maybe they should make it top 150. They need more players.
Talk about the quarterback group. So the top 5 quarterbacks, this was a little bit of a controversy, right? The number 1 quarterback in the NFL, according to NFL players who submitted their ballots, Lamar Jackson was the number 1 quarterback in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes was number 2. Now, I don't hate this per se, because I love Lamar, and I have Lamar as the second best quarterback in the NFL behind Mahomes. So having them 1 and 2, if you want to put them in that order, fine, because we're really talking about 2nd and 4th on this list of 100. So Not that big a deal. Then you have Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott. In Sesame Street, they say, which one of these things is not like the other? Jalen Hurts does not belong on this top 5 list.
You know what? I think I think he should be on the list, but maybe not top 5. So I would agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking over their stats. He has the lowest completion percentage of pretty much anyone on the list besides CJ Stroud. He has the lowest passer rating of anybody on the list, and he's in the top 5. And at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you've got CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, Tua, and Joe Burrow at 10. So I know how much you love Joe Burrow. I love seeing Brock Purdy ahead of him because fuck you. And I think that Brock Purdy could have been in the top 5.
Well, I was going to tell you, I think Brock Purdy was ranked too high. He should have been down where Rodgers was at 98 or 92.
I think he should have been up where Josh Allen was at 3. Now, a guy who was a little bit low from my taste, Jared Goff was at 12. And to give an idea, Jared Goff had completed 67% of his passes last year for 4,575 yards, 30 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, had a 97.9 passer rating. He was the 12th best quarterback. So that just goes to show you that there's no love for non-flashy, non-dual threat quarterbacks. If you're a pocket passer in this league, you are officially boring and you don't belong in the top 100.
Yeah, because was Matthew Stafford on that list? I meant to double check it, and
he was one spot ahead of Goff.
Okay, but yeah, those guys, you're right. I guess those guys are, because they're so old schooling, they're slowly getting off these lists.
And to touch on your Baker Mayfield, because I did have him listed as somebody who could have potentially made the list, and yes, you could put him there over Aaron Rodgers. But looking at the other guys on this list, you know, Baker Mayfield didn't have a great year last year. He just had a good year for Baker Mayfield. You know, in terms of other quarterbacks in the league, I know he had 4,000 yards passing, but his numbers really they didn't jump off the page to me. So I don't know. So to me, I'd be okay with not having him on there, but I do agree with you that if you're going to have Aaron Rodgers, Mr. 4 snaps, you got to have Baker Mayfield.
And that's kind of what my thinking was, Wayne, is like, how is this asshole on the list for 4 snaps and Baker can't make the list? Like, what the hell?
Tight ends only had 3. 3 tight ends made this list, one of them being George Kittle. And I do love from that receiver episode when, who is it? Kittle. I think Kelsey calls him, you know, the best quarterback or best tight end in tight end university. You know, because the guy deserves it. He's a great blocker, great receiver, does the whole thing. We had Kelsey, Kittle, Laporta. Can't really complain with those 3. I did have Hawkinson listed as a potential if you're going to put another one in there. And Evan Ingram had over 100 catches last year.
And so this kind of surprised me because I thought a lot of teams were tight end heavy. Does it just mean that there's not as great at tight ends in the league anymore? Not as much.
I think it means that more receivers filled out these ballots than we would think.
Yeah, good point.
And then we only had 5 running backs. As we know, I think running back is just slightly more valuable than kicker. And it's just not that valuable of a position to me. But you did have McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Raheem Mostert as the third best running back in the NFL. Kyron Williams, Saquon Barkley. I think Breece Hall, David Montgomery, could have been on that list. You know who really, really got shafted? And I bet you wouldn't even think of this name. James Conner. James Conner last year with the Cardinals had 208 carries for 1,040 yards. That's 5 yards per carry he averaged. And he only played 13 games. He ran
for 1,000. I was like, he was hurt a lot too.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a guy who you put him in there for 17 games. We're talking about probably the NFL's leading rusher.
Yeah. I wouldn't even have thought of him, Wayne, at all.
And then one that's close to your heart, we look at the defensive secondary, 5 corners. You mentioned Sauce Gardner, 10 safeties. Let me touch on the corners for a second. Jalen Ramsey, number 1. I'm like, who was this poll taken in 2013? And then they just got the results, this year, because Jalen Ramsey is not the best corner in the NFL anymore. He might have been.
That guy can't stay healthy anymore. Talk about health.
Well, and I'll give you an idea. So, Pro Football Focus, his score, his player grade is 66.4. That's not good. Deron Bland, who was the number 2 cornerback, is 90.4. Well, he also had 8 interceptions last year, and he was great. In fact, quarterbacks had a passer rating of 60.8 when they targeted him last year. Totally deserves to be on this list. Your guy, Patrick Surtain, PFF 69.
That's wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Gronk might like that number, but that is not a good number for PFF. And he only had one
That's
interception
bullshit
last
is what
year.
that is, Wado.
Well, I will tell you this: when Patrick Surtain was targeted last year, quarterbacks had an 88.2 rating against him.
Oh, dang. That's
So
no
the
bueno.
guys what I think were completely shafted. Jalen Johnson, Chicago Bears, which actually when
I
they asked
mentioned
Jalen Johnson about the list, he said, "Ain't no way that he's not on that
Right.
list."
That's like
So
what I thought too. I was like, how's that guy not on the list, man? That guy's great.
His PFF rating was 90.8, and his quarterback rating when targeted is 50.9.
Oh,
So
damn.
he's a guy you don't want to throw at. And then the other guy I had on here, Derek Stingley from the Houston Texans. Again, he's not a big flashy name, wears giant chains like Jalen Ramsey, but his quarterback ranking or quarterback passer rating when you targeted Derek Stingley last year, 41.3. Do not throw it in his direction.
Nice, dude. I like those numbers.
And then, of course, I did write down here just for you, number 3 safety in the NFL last year, Justin Simmons, 57 overall, still not signed.
Yes, which I've talked about. I talk about this topic all the time with you off air, Wayne, about I don't understand. He's like one of the best safeties in the league. Obviously, a lot of players see that. I'm still surprised why we let him go. I don't know if it's really a cap number. I kind of was hoping that maybe some way, somehow we get reunited with him. Maybe he'd take a smaller deal. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't want to leave Denver because he's still here. He's like, I see him spotted on Twitter all the time that he's golfing or he's doing this. Like he goes to Nuggets games. So he's still living in town. But like we were talking off air, he's visiting the Saints today. And depending on if he likes the scheme, he might go there. And just as a side note, Dennis Allen used to be our defensive coordinator, so that makes total sense that he would go there.
Well, you know where I want to see him sign, and you're not going to like this: Kansas City.
Ugh.
See him twice a year.
No, please. Like I honestly thought that's what he would do. I thought he was going to be so pissed off. He's like, screw you guys. I'm going to go play for the Chiefs. I'm going to win another chip. I'm going to win a chip. I'm going to get a ring, and I'm going to beat you guys twice. So surprised it doesn't happen. I hope it doesn't happen.
And speaking of safeties, there were 2 safeties signed by the Tennessee Titans, and that is Jamal Adams, big name, and Quandre Diggs, 29 and 31 years old, respectively. Both of them signed 1-year deals. I think they're good value signings. My question is this for you. Looking at the 2 signings at safety, they also have, Jeffrey Simmons, who's a great edge rusher, very underrated, I think, in the league as an edge rusher. They drafted Tavondre Swift, Cedric Gray, James Williams, the safety out of Miami, Jalen Harrell, the edge rusher out of Michigan, who is very good. They got J.C. Latham on the left tackle side to protect Will Levis. You got Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Tony Pollard.
Lots of weapons.
Are we sleeping on the Titans? Could this be a team that goes like 12-5 and wins the AFC South?
I'm glad that you brought that up because I've been thinking about this when I brought up this topic. And you brought that question to me, I was like, you know what? Maybe. Like, the only thing that scares me is rookie head coach. It's like, is he going to put that all together in the first year? It's going to be really hard to do that.
I think what scares me is all the passing weapons that they got, and Will Levis, who I think is a big arm quarterback, and I do like that has a big arm. I hope they don't try to pass it too much. I mean, he's still essentially a rookie. I would love to see them lean on Tony Pollard and just have him throw occasionally, but you didn't go out and get Tyler Boyd and Calvin Ridley to go with DeAndre Hopkins and I forgot the other guy's name, the wide receiver.
I'm drawing a blank too, Wayne.
I'm gonna kick myself. But the number 4 receiver is basically a number 2 on any other team, and you didn't go out and get all those guys so that he could hand the ball. Treylon Burks, yes. You don't want him handing the ball off if you got all those weapons. So I worry that they might put too much pressure on him to throw the ball too much.
Yeah, I could see that happening. He does have a good arm, but it's like you just said, they just got a new left tackle, so they got to be a cohesive unit to be able to run the ball. So that's all a matter of that, Wayne. But yeah, a running game is a rookie quarterback's best friend.
Training camp battles. Obviously, there's some quarterback battles that we wanted to discuss. I know you sent over the teams: Denver, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, and Vegas. So I'll run through my thoughts quickly, and then I'll let you go through the 4 teams as well. Denver, obviously, Bo Nix, Zach Wilson. I think Zach Wilson wins it initially, but Bo Nix is going to be the starter before midway through the season. Minnesota, you've got Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. Same scenario. I think Darnold goes maybe 9 games before McCarthy takes over. Pittsburgh, you've got Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. I know you've been saying that Fields has been looking really great. Wilson's been hurt. There's a chance he could win it. I still think Russell Wilson is the starter, but I do think that Fields will get his shot. And then you got Vegas, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell. I don't even think that's really a competition. I think Gardner Minshew is the guy.
Okay, so these are my thoughts, Wayne. And so you're wrong about Zach Wilson. He's probably going to be the 3 guy. He's probably going to be our emergency quarterback, if anything. And Stidham's probably going to start the year, even though, dude, the whole town is so hyped about Bo Nix right now. So they're like, oh, he's going to be the guy. He's going to be the guy. But we'll see because it's Sean Payton. What were the other teams? The Raiders. You're right. I think you're right about Gardner Minshew. I think he's the clear-cut guy. But I don't think he's one of those top-tier guy either. So who knows if Devontae Adams is going to be happy about that. I feel like they're just trying to, like, make that dude happy. Minnesota, I've heard J.J. McCarthy has not looked good. Like you said, that it's just camp, so it's still early. But Darnold has been in the league for a while. He has more starts. I see him starting, and at some point, JJ will play. And Pittsburgh, the one I wanted to talk about most. I talked to you about this off air. I have this conspiracy theory that I think the Steelers made Russ push his sled, and that's why he has his calf injury. And I think they did this on purpose because they're like, hey, he's older. He's an older guy. We're going to push him hard. Maybe he gets injured, then we'll be able to see Fields. It's just my conspiracy hat putting it on. It's just what I kind of think. Who knows? But I think Justin Fields is going to win out the job, and he's going to start week 1.
Okay. Well, I'm a Justin Fields fan. I was on the Justin Fields bandwagon when he was in Chicago. I thought he was great. I told Brandon, me and Brandon argued about, what they should do. And I know Brandon wanted to keep Fields and take 2 players in the draft, Marvin Harrison and somebody else. I said, that's stupid because you got to pay Fields then. So get a rookie quarterback for 4 years on the cheap. That just makes more sense financially. Speaking of money, extension wise, your guy, Quinn Miners, guard for the Broncos, signs a 4-year, $72 million. That's 18 per year to play guard. And I was looking at some of the other guards on here who signed offseason deals. We got Robert Hunt, who signed a 5-year, $100 million deal, so $20 million a year with the Carolina Panthers, and Michael Onwenu, who signed with the Patriots at 3 years, $57 or $19 million a year. He had a better PFF rating than both of them. He's one of the top-rated guards in the NFL, and you just got him for a discount.
See, I didn't know that. When you told me the numbers, I didn't know that. So I'm glad because the guy is a beast, Wayne. I'm sure you do, like during the draft time, watch all 22 tape. I do that sometimes. And man, if you just watch this guy, he just tosses dudes. He just is like, you see him and like on the run plays, you see him grabbing dudes and just freaking tossing them. And it's awesome to watch because this guy is like so fucking awesome. And he's one of our better players. So I'm glad that we locked him up. Most of our offensive line is locked up now. We are paying our offensive line pretty well. So which means I expect him to be really good. We are questionable at center. We don't know who's going to be our center yet, but I'm sure that'll get figured out. And I'm just really glad that we locked him down because he was one of our – I'm the type, Wayne, that you draft guys, and if they're good for your team, you sign them long-term. That's how this whole thing works. And if you don't do that, your team is failing. So it just made me made me feel good. I'm like, cool, we drafted a guy, 4th round, and he fucking kicked ass, and we paid him, and that's how it should be.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. It's definitely a great signing. And then the other extension that we saw was Harrison Butker with the Chiefs, got 4 years, $25.6 million. He's now the highest paid kicker in the NFL, which just goes to show you that it doesn't really matter what you say out there. If you can kick 90% field goals, you're going to get paid.
And let's mention the whole new kickoff thing is making kickers way more valuable now. And he's the best one in the league. So yeah, I saw that he was going to do this. I saw it happening.
And now that he's getting paid and we know he's not going anywhere, you can't cancel this guy. Wouldn't it be almost kind of funny to see him kick some really great kickoffs, and then look at the camera and be like, yeah, let's see a woman do that.
Keep stirring that pot, Wayne. Just keep it stirring.
I'd laugh. I don't know about everybody, but I would definitely laugh. All right, so we got through the news in just under an hour. We've got a couple of segments left here, so bear with us if we run over an hour. Hopefully you're enjoying the show. I know I am.
Yeah.
But we do have our Stadium Rant article of the week, which is by a writer named Nicholas Mullick. And Nick is one of our writers here. He wrote this piece called Michael Thomas's Fall from Grace, and really it outlines what happened to Michael Thomas, because as we remember, Michael Thomas was one of the best receivers in the NFL for like 4 or 5 years, and then just kind of fell off. A lot of it's injuries, and he does touch on the injuries in the article, but he also talks about a domestic assault charge that he got. He also got a charge for pushing down somebody in front of his house, like tried to take his camera or whatever and just shoved him to the ground. Police got called on that. In the locker room, he's been a headache. Last year, he was openly critical of Derek Carr as the quarterback. So there's a lot of things that have contributed to his fall from grace, according to Nick. I really think it is mostly the injuries. And I'll tell you why, because we just talked about Harrison Butker, right? And I'll even bring up a guy who's worse than Harrison Butker, even the women will disagree. But that's Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy beat up his girlfriend, threw her onto a bed full of guns. You know, this whole thing was publicized, smashed her head against the wall, and still got a contract with the Dallas Cowboys because he could still play. So Michael Thomas, I think, despite shoving down a guy in front of his house, despite the domestic abuse, despite calling Derek Carr trash, if Michael Thomas could still go out there and run a 4.4 and catch 125 balls, he'd be catching 125 balls. It has nothing to do with all that stuff. It's just the injuries, I think.
So that's a good point. Speaking of that, we're talking about Michael Thomas. I had brought Michael Thomas up to when I was on Man Hour about a possible wide receiver for the Broncos to sign, what's this guy's name? I forget his name, Wayne.
Nicholas Mullick.
Nicholas. Okay, so he mentioned in his article that he thinks that because of all of Michael Thomas's all this domestic stuff and all this off the field stuff is the reason why the Broncos haven't signed him. And I didn't like that he just immediately assumed that that's not why we signed him. I think it's a totally different scenario. I think I agree with Wayne. I think a lot of it is injury. But I think that if he is this head case cancer guy in the locker room, I feel like Sean Payton might be the only guy that might be able to just to deal with him because he's dealt with him for so many years. Kind of like a Mike Tomlin situation with Antonio Brown. He was the one coach that could put him in line, get him going. He's like the only success Michael Thomas had was when he was with Sean Payton. So that was like the only thing I really took away from that is that I keep hoping that somewhere that sometime we might sign Michael Thomas, but maybe like you said, Wayne, maybe his injuries are just too much.
I think he does eventually end up somewhere. I mean, Odell Beckham ended up somewhere despite the injuries, but Odell Beckham also wasn't a head case. I mean, self-absorbed like most wide receivers. But Odell Beckham wasn't like trashing his quarterback and being a cancer in the locker room. He was just like, hey, I'm amazing. Watch me on Snapchat. Like, you know, that's his thing. And that's fine because he still went out there and performed. So I don't know. I think there's still a market out there. And speaking of Odell Beckham, I wouldn't be surprised if it is a team like the Ravens who could use a wide receiver alongside their guys to go out there. Or if it's a team like the Chiefs who their wide receivers had drop issues. Well, Michael Thomas, for all of his flaws, he may not be as fast as he used to be. He may not have that vertical leap. Michael Thomas still does not drop balls. He has great hands. So he's a great possession receiver. Bring him into Kansas City, let him catch 45 balls and get a Super Bowl.
So what do you think the issue is? Why he hasn't been signed? Do you think it's teams that don't want to deal with that? Or is it a money thing? What do you think the issue is?
It's a combination of the teams not wanting to deal with him and him not being as fast and as athletic as he was pre-injury. So, like I said, he can be the biggest headache in the world, but if he's going to go out there and moss people, he's going to get a big contract from somebody. But the problem is he can't do those things athletically anymore. So now teams don't want to deal with a headache because they're not going to get the production to justify it. So like I said, he's basically just a possession receiver who you're probably going to get 40 catches out of. And is that worth bringing him in and being just a disruption in the locker room?
Right. And when you break it down like that, I'd say no.
Yeah, probably not. But great article by Nick. Definitely check out Stadium Rant and all their great articles. But Nicholas Mullick wrote this article. Michael Thomas's Fall from Grace. It's a great piece. And so definitely check that out and read that. Now, somebody that we love to make fun of, and last week we didn't really get a chance to because we both kind of agreed with him, but I know that we are not going to agree with Man Hour Buck. That is Michael Buckheiser from Man Hour. Please tune into Man Hour. That's every day, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. live on Facebook. You can watch Mike and all of his crazy hot takes. We only give you one a week. You get 5 a week or more when you watch him live. So definitely tune in. Let's listen to what Mike had to say about Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes is a system quarterback. Without a good system in Kansas City, he would be a below average quarterback.
Okay. Let's
that was enough of that.
That was enough. We didn't need more than 6 seconds of that. That was pretty much enough of that. Let's talk about system quarterbacks. I've said it 1,000 times. Make it 1,001. All quarterbacks are system quarterbacks. Tom Brady with the Patriots, Peyton Manning with the Colts took his system to Denver with him. Joe Montana with the West Coast offense, Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, Brett Favre. I don't care who you are. Every quarterback is a system quarterback. And if you put them in a bad system, they're going to perform poorly. I would love, Buck's not here to answer for himself, but I would love to know who he thinks in history has been a quarterback in a bad system who has excelled.
That's a good question because I'd like to know that answer too. But we said on this show many a times that Mahomes is the type of quarterback. He's going to go on probably almost any one of the 32 teams in the NFL, and he's going to kick ass. I'm sorry, that guy's arm is fucking awesome. The guy just gets it. So I don't care what he says. He may be a system quarterback. That's what helping him succeed. But his athleticism is going to help him still win games.
100%. And if anybody, like I said, all quarterbacks are system quarterbacks. But if anybody wasn't, it would be Patrick Mahomes. And we said this last episode. You put Patrick Mahomes on Carolina with a rookie coach and that shit show of an owner and that crappy talent they have, they go 10-7. Like they probably are a wild card team.
That division's so shitty, they might win the division.
Right. I think Atlanta is still in there. All right, so that's enough making fun of Buck. We gave him
sorry, Buck.
He did enough in his 6 seconds to make fun of himself. But it is time for fan feedback. We do appreciate you guys, interacting with us and letting us know how you feel about the show. And obviously, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want to interact with us, it is at NFL Experts Pod. And you can interact with us. And these are fan interactions that we had over social media for the past week, starting with our guy, John Peebles, who says, swap the Eagles and the Lions. So this is about your rankings, your top 10 rankings. He said, swap the Eagles and the Lions.
Yep.
And then Randy and Cindy Scoble said, John Peebles, you might be right. So I have it here. Where did you have them? So 5 and 3.
3. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so move the Lions to 3 and the Eagles to 5. I mean, I don't really have a hard...
I wasn't against that. I'll be okay with that.
Yeah, I don't want to make fun of our fans either, and I do appreciate the interaction. And I know John doesn't mind being made fun of, but let's bring that quote back up here again. Randy and Sydney School. Now, do you know what they say, Mark, about people who have joint Facebook accounts?
Let's hear it, Wade. I don't know.
They get along great. That's what I've heard. So that is the... thing about people who have joint accounts. Now, the other Facebook message we got here was from our friend Mark Lavelle, who said, in order, Chiefs, Niners, Ravens, Eagles, the rest don't matter. I
gotta scoff a little bit about that. I disagree. Yeah. The rest do matter. So yeah, he's right about those are good teams, but there's a lot of other good teams in the league, man.
That's right. Blue teams matter. Black teams matter. Whatever color your mascot is, they matter. So we don't take that approach here. Listen, all teams matter, Mark. Right? We don't hear any ignorance in this show.
All the teams matter.
Now, as far as Mark, though, he did have a great question for us on Facebook, and I do want to throw it up here. He says, which AFC and NFC teams can best survive the regular season if their starting quarterback gets injured mid-season and doesn't return until the playoffs. So I'll let you go first, and I'll let you choose. I'm going to go first on one of the conferences, so I'll let you pick first whether you go NFC or AFC. But in my mind, I thought it has to be a team with a good defense, a decent run game, and a solid backup. So which conference are you taking?
All right, I'll do AFC.
Okay.
And I'm going to go with the Steelers. My prediction is Russell is going to lose his job, and it's going to be Fields starting week 1. And Russ is going to be the backup. So when Fields gets hurt later on in the season because he runs the ball a lot, Russ is going to come in, hold down the fort, and they're going to make the playoffs.
I 100% agree. And the reason we're doing this is me and Mark both had the same teams for the AFC and the NFC. And I thought my NFC team was going to be a shocker. So for the NFC, I had the Atlanta Falcons. And my reason being that they have great offensive weapons with Bijan and Pitts and London. Their defense is really good. A lot of people don't realize how good that defense is. And then they had brought in Kirk Cousins. Well, if Cousins gets hurt, they drafted Michael Penix with the 8th overall pick. Michael Penix was probably my favorite quarterback in this draft. I mean, that guy can just sling the ball. He throws for 400 yards a game in college. He was unstoppable. I think you put him into this NFL offense, teams not really getting a chance to get tape on him or get any sort of scouting report on him. He can hold down the fort for 8 games and go 7-1.
And like I just said, that division is fucking terrible. So yeah, he could hold down the fort for Cousins. I don't want to wish injury on any quarterback, but I can see Cousins getting hurt again and him stepping in and driving him to the playoffs.
So those were our fan interactions. Please interact with us on those social media sites so that you can put in your questions. We'll answer them here, or your thoughts. If it's, you guys suck, or, I don't like what you said about Harrison Butker. Go ahead and tell us, and we're happy to read those here.
You didn't like what you said about couples that have a Facebook together.
Yeah. I don't think they get along at all. So whatever your thing is, definitely send it to us. We want to hear it. And that is our show. I don't think either of us had a 2-minute warning, and we were right at the 1 hour and 2-minute mark.
Great show, Wayne. So everybody that like this, that like the show, the content tonight, please interact with us so we can have more fan feedback. We love all the interaction. Thank you, Bubba. Thank you, John. And thank you, Buck, for always giving us great content every week to make fun of you on. Love it. It was a great episode. I mean, party on.
Yes, absolutely. Party on. Please make sure you are checking out Man Hour on Facebook at 2 p.m. on the weekdays. Make sure you are reading articles on Stadium Rant, and make sure you tune in next week because we are going to have more joint couples sending in Facebook notes. It is going to be fantastic. That's going to be the whole show. So party on, Mark.
Party on, Wayne.